Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. This is Success with Srini.
Welcome back to Success with Srini. Happy Tuesday morning to you. As I'm recording the podcast today, I have so many thoughts crossing my mind. And I'm just thinking that if you allow me to speak for the next 3 hours, even then I don't think I can get all my thoughts in. And I do this podcast every day. Every day I have the same feeling that I come here, I have so many things to talk about. But then luckily I get a question or two from the listeners of this podcast. They rescue me. So I put all my thoughts behind. I listen to their question. I work answering that question. But then this is the biggest question of all, which is, I do this podcast every day. Why is that I still have so many thoughts in my mind? And why I struggle with this? Question. Today is the 151st day on the Gregorian calendar for the year 2022. That means there are 214 more days left in this year. The reason why I'm calling it out is because May 31st is officially the completion of 5 months of this podcast. 5 months every day. And when I started this podcast, I was thinking, wow, what will I say every day? Every day I have to say something. And what will I say every day that keeps the listeners inbound? That will engage the listeners, but then that will make this podcast sticky. And I made a commitment to myself, which is, I want to do this every day. The last time I made a commitment to myself was in 2021, and I did for about 6 weeks. I gave up. And prior to that, I gave up multiple times. And today, here is where we stand after 5 months of doing this podcast. I'll tell you, the finished product sounds good. So you are listening to this podcast with a nice intro, and you will listen to a nice outro at the end. And please, it's edited out, a few things here and there, but I prefer not to edit as much. Edit it out. You will probably see this podcast with a bunch of videos and with a transcript, bunch of words on YouTube. You're seeing this on YouTube, maybe. The finished product is okay. May not be the best. It's okay. The finished product looks good, but there is a lot of struggle that goes into this podcast. And I want to highlight this. But before I go there, before I talk about the struggle, I want to thank you for you being a subscriber, you being a listener, and you being a supporter of everything that I have done. I just sent out an email about 10 days ago saying, I crossed 150th day on my podcast. I sent that email out on the 140th day. Like we were still 10 days behind. I did that because I already figured out what I'll be doing for the next 10 days on this podcast. Did not record, but then I had an idea. And bunch of people responded back to me, congratulating me and saying thank you and all that. The truth is this. The truth is there is a lot of struggle behind this. And now I have a team. All of us struggle through this process. It's not easy to kind of commit to something like this on a daily basis and keep on doing it without really getting to know who is listening on the other side. First day, second day, 3 day, 4 downloads, 3 downloads, 2 downloads. And I respected those downloads. I respected people listening. We started putting this podcast on Facebook. 2 views, 3 views, 1 like, 2 likes. Kept on doing it day after day after day without expecting much. And the question was, what do I want from this? First of all, why should we do this? Why there is a need for a podcast when there are millions of podcasts and everybody does incredible job than me? I don't consider myself to be the best in the game, and I don't think that I have an incredible idea that's going to change your life that other people do not have. I don't consider myself to be the ultimate source of any information. Forget about some information. Why is that? I still need to do a podcast. What is that I have that I can share that's going to bring value to people? This is the biggest question I had when I started. And of course, there are millions of other podcasts and there are incredible thinkers and coaches and mentors. All of them, they are playing their game at a whole different level, and I don't consider myself to be at that level. Question is, what value will I bring so that my listener, that one listener who is listening, will listen to this? And when you're listening, listen, you're investing some time. And I respect that time. What can I do to bring that change or bring that solution or bring that outcome or bring that whatever that is to you? How do I aid the process so that you become better in whatever you're trying to achieve? Big question when I started this. And then in that email I said, we are growing every month with this podcast. January was hard, February was okay, March was a little bit better than February, and then April was amazing. May, the best month we had in terms of downloads. It's good to say, I have these number of people on my email list, these number of people listen to me. This is a wrong thing, seriously. In 2019, I made an attempt to go to the peak of Mount Everest. And as a part of that process, I had to, anybody who climbs Everest, they have to go hike up to the base camp and live there for about 6 weeks or 4 weeks and then go up. And during that time in the base camp, there is not much you can do or you have to do other than sit in the tent all day, all night. You can't sleep in the night. Sleep is a rarity there. So you have to kill time. And during the time, I carried a couple of books with me from Kathmandu all the way to hiking in my backpack. I carried those books to the base camp. And one of the books was Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I was reading this book. James Clear said something incredible. He said, listen, people who chase goals, they struggle. With chasing goals, you'll struggle. You're preparing to run for a marathon. Yeah, you spend like 7 hours a day preparing 5 days a week. And then once you cross that finish line, what else? What's next? Nothing. And what do people do? They stop training. I read that book in the base camp and carried that book with me to base camp, and I'm reading this book in the base camp, and then guess what? I came down from the mountain. I couldn't summit, and I have a whole video on this and multiple podcasts I have done on this and why I could not summit. But then I came back, and then guess what? I stopped training. And whatever I read in the base camp, it kind of, wow, he said that in the book. You see, people stop training. 1 download, 2 downloads, people stop. I have many people who I tell them to start a podcast. This podcast was about me, accumulating ideas. I can't come every day here and have a conversation with you that is not incremental. So you go to work today, how can you be incremental? You go into the relationship that you are in for last 10, 15, 20 years with your spouse, with your partner, how can you be incremental? With your children, how can you have an incremental conversation? The same stuff doesn't work. How can I bring in more ideas? How can I be incremental in everything that I do? Because I'm exposing myself daily. I'm here on this podcast every day. So if you listen to this podcast, you know my mindset. You exactly know who I am. What I want is, I want my subscribers, my listeners to achieve whatever they are trying to achieve. And I want to aid that process. That's the goal. Okay, the goal, let's talk about that for a second. So James Clear, let's talk about that. He said, people give up because they're chasing goals. And once they accomplish the goal, they're done. And even if they don't accomplish the goal, they're done. Instead, winners, they focus on systems. So the first couple of months of this podcast was, how can I build a system? Not worried about subscribers, not worried about what is a system, what are the elements of a system. System includes that I do something on a daily basis. So that means consistency. That means you say you will do something and you'll do that thing, whatever you said you will do. So commitment to consistency. That's the first element of the system. The second element of the system is that I need to get to say something incrementally better, incrementally new. So if I say the same thing over and over again, you will unsubscribe, you will leave, and I have no other way to get you back in. Well, I would want you to leave if you feel that this is not the right thing. You feel that this guy is not right, this guy is not telling the right stuff. He's not there. He doesn't aid my success, or he doesn't take away my problem or my pain or my suffering from his ideas, from his concept, from his solutions, then I have no right to have you listen to the podcast. Why would you? So I have that clarity when I'm doing this. That's another element of the system. We stay grounded, we stay humble through the process. We are aware, we value the listener, we value somebody who's investing their time to listen to the podcast. Then comes recording, editing. You're listening to this podcast, which is an edited out podcast, by the way. That means at the time of recording, there is no intro, there is no outro, but then there will be an intro. Towards the end, you listen to an outro. All it's a nice product. But this is the finished product, edited out, created, ready to go on YouTube, ready to go on my Apple Podcasts, Apple platform, and several other platforms. But the truth is this. The truth is, there is a lot of heartburn that goes into, a lot of time, effort, energy that goes into producing something like this. There are situations, well, not situations, wrong choice of word, happen. See, I just gave you an example. Numerous times I pressed the record button and I just don't get the word right. One time, 22 takes. 22 times I recorded the podcast. And the last time I recorded the podcast, I was really happy. It was going good. I looked, I did not press the record button and I was speaking. I have seen in the last 5 months, I have seen it all. I have recorded this podcast in my garage. I have recorded this podcast in my car, on the countryside, going in small roads, pulling over to the side and recording this on my iPhone. I've recorded this right now. I'm recording this in my closet. And God is watching me. Because there's no way for you to say it, and I'm not saying anything to impress you. I have been put in situations because this is a daily thing. I have to find myself in situations and give this a priority. Doesn't matter, one listener, one subscriber, one comment, doesn't matter. We do this consistently. It's a system. I don't think the system is evolved. I don't think that I have systematically gotten to a point where I can say yes, No, I don't think. This is still in process. The goal is not 10,000 downloads, 100,000 downloads a day, none of that stuff. There are people who talk about that. It's not about that. The goal is to get a question. The goal is to have a great conversation. And the goal is to create value without ever knowing who the listener is. You're a listener, you don't need to identify yourself. There is no way. I'm not expecting any attribution from you. I'm not expecting you to say any great things about the podcast, even if you want to say. I'm not expecting a payback at all. Zero. But the goal from this side is that how can we serve someone whom we will never meet, who we will never talk to, I will never talk to. That's the goal. And for that, the system has to be in place. This is about subscribers and seminars and workshops. People do that. They happen great, but that's not the chase. The chase is to help people who listen silently, who work on their goals silently, have a system in place to help other people's goals. But the goal is not to get subscribers, listeners, or make money or build influence, any of that. I'll tell you, one of my deep goals is to have great conversations. So, starting 1st of June, which is tomorrow, and I've been thinking about it for a long time, and now I'm starting to put this into play. I'm trying to get to feature the listeners of this podcast as my guests on this podcast. We'll try to see if we can do this as many times as possible, but then at least once a month, I'm going to have a listener of this podcast to be a guest, and I'm going to make that listener share their strategies of how they achieved whatever they achieved, or whatever their systems are for achieving whatever they would like to achieve. Everyone is an achiever. I don't see anybody who is not a winner. I meet people in my day-to-day life. I want to learn from them. I'm invisibly learn from people. This is one of my life pursuits, is to learn from people invisibly. That's exactly what this podcast is doing. I'm expecting you to learn invisibly, and that is a calling. It is from our side, on this side. Thank you for you being a listener and subscriber, and above all, a supporter of this podcast. And we completed 5 months. This is a gratitude podcast episode today. And tomorrow is a new month. It's a new start for us. But then I'm constantly thinking how to raise the game. And again, take it to a whole different level and practically as far as possible, so that this delivers the value that you want in your life. Big goal, but that's the calling on this side. Okay, that's all for now. I hope today's podcast helps in some level. At least you get to know what's happening behind the scenes here. And wholeheartedly, me from my team here, I'm thankful to you for everything that you are doing for us invisibly. Wherever you are, be safe, and we will start tomorrow, the new month, with some incredible new ideas. Stay tuned.